Family comes first, but food comes a very close second.
I love it.
It's the joy of growing.
It looks like ringlets, doesn't it?
Cooking.
It's a bit of all right.
And eating it.
Well, it can't be bad if I'm having a second lot.
How are you, man, Mary?
I'm getting a bit sort of happy.
And I love meeting the people who share this passion.
Exquisite.
And best of all, there's still so much wonderful food to discover. Gorgeous colour, look at it. It's most exciting. Looking good. So let's get cracking.
I was brought up to be frugal, so I love to make the most of every ingredient.
We're on a budget today.
I have 4 delicious recipes that prove watching the pennies doesn't mean sacrificing on flavour. A sausage phyllo swirl, which is so much fun to make. A mouth-watering cut of steak that won't break the bank. And a beloved pudding that makes the most of humble ingredients. But first, a sumptuous dish with a cheeky twist.
This is spaghetti courgette with crab. Absolutely delicious. I'm using tinned crab. It's half the price of fresh crab. A little luxury that'll go a long way. And you can have it on the shelf and make it on the spur of the moment.
What also lifts this dish is mixing courgettes with spaghetti.
And I'm going to spiralise them. Now just look at that. It's quite fun to do, isn't it? So.
It will make it much lighter to eat, and they're in season from June to October, so even cheaper then.
So that's just about it.
The sauce couldn't be simpler. 1 sliced banana shallot in plenty of oil. Be generous.
I love the smell of the olive oil coming up. Then I'm going to add 2 cloves of garlic and then 1 red chilli, finely chopped. Right, that's just had a few moments. Then in goes the courgette. It looks like ringlets, doesn't it? I've got the heat right up. Use 2 spoons. Make sure that it's well mixed in.
Add a few more glugs of olive oil, season, then it's time for the star ingredient.
The drained weight of this white crab is just over 100 grams. And in that goes.
It smells so inviting and ready for the cooked spaghetti.
Well drained, drop that in. That bright green looks good.
I love the final flourishes that bring the sauce to life. Chopped dill and lemon juice will add piquancy to make it sing.
It smells like a visit to Italy and a wonderful aroma. This was very inexpensive to make, but it has a touch of luxury about it because all these bright colours, all these ingredients are evenly mixed in and you want to serve it right now, so I'm getting on with the job. I'm not going to waste anything. I think that's an exciting dish for a special occasion and inexpensive to make.
If there's someone who knows a thing or two about cooking on a shoestring, it's school chef Holly Charnock.
What are you having, Izzy? Pasta? Joe, what are you having?
Would you like some cheese?
Pasta.
Holly's genius at making the budget stretch was rewarded when she won School Chef of the Year in 2020.
Top tips for cooking budget food is to cook from fresh, to get creative. Also, once you've used stuff, if you don't use it all up, pop it in the freezer. bring it out for next time. There'll be no wastage then.
Today, Holly and team are recreating a version of her winning dishes for the 240 students. It's braised beef pasta.
So it's exactly the same as what I used inside the tortellini for the competition dish. What we'll do is we'll cook this through and then we'll mix it through the pasta once the pasta's cooked.
And a beetroot chocolate brownie with banana ice cream.
It's fancy, isn't it?
It does look delicious.
Can't wait.
Though the versions that won the competition for Holly looked a little grander, both still had to come in at under £1.40 a head. The braised beef filled a tortellini, and the beetroot chocolate brownie was served with a raspberry coulis. Amazing.
Very posh. So basically, what we would serve on a school day, but like super pimped up.
Deputy Head Pauline Coleman and fellow cook Chrissy Ryder are about to have a taste of it for themselves.
The girl done good. This is nice.
It is delicious.
This is really nice.
Chef Holly?
Chef Holly. Do we have to call you something posh now?
No, we just bow down every time we say it.
Time for the real taste test as the children arrive for lunch.
What are you all having for pudding? Chocolate brownie, fruit.
Chocolate and ice cream.
Holly's got an unbelievably high percentage of children that stay for school dinners. I think it's something like 85%. Now, normally it's around about 50%. So I think the main feedback from parents is that we get more and more children staying for school dinners.
What will they make of Holly's winning combinations?
Would you like some cheese? Some parmesan? Yeah? I personally despise cheese. But she put I really don't like it at all. But she put just a tiny sprinkle of cheese on it and I ate it all.
And those beetroot chocolate brownies.
My favourite part about the dish was the brownies. I think it's my favourite because I like how you can't taste the beetroot in it, but it gives it a nice sweetness.
I think that if I can give them something that makes them happy in their school day, then it makes my job easier, it makes my life better. So it's probably about helping them grow and develop through their school life, to be honest.
Like, it was really, 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 really good.
We've always known we've got the best school chef in the country, and now the rest of the country knows that too. So thank you, Holly.
Time for the children to show their appreciation.
How cute are they?
Hats off to Holly and all the school chefs around the country. I think they'd approve of my next dish, a delicious sausage and spinach phyllo swirl.
It's a bit like a Cumberland sausage, which is like that, but with a coat on of phyllo.
Start off by sautéing one sliced leek in butter, then add some baby spinach.
And just wilt it. There we are. And now 1 clove of garlic pressed, and then keep turning it. If you're growing spinach at home, the best one to have is perpetual spinach, and it grows on. The more you pick, the more it comes. Look at that spinach. It was right to the top of the pan, and with wilting, it's gone right down.
Remove the meat of 6 pork sausages from their skins and mix into the cooled spinach.
This is a really frugal recipe because it's making 6 sausages much more into a special meal at very little cost.
Now to give it its all-important wrapping. With phyllo pastry, a little goes a long way, which is ideal when keeping the costs down.
So I'm going to take 4 sheets off. I'm going to take the ones that are left, and I should think there are about 8 or 9, and I'm going to re-wrap that and put it straight back in the freezer because I don't want to waste it.
I love this bit. Using melted butter, brush the joining edges of the 4 sheets so they form a metre-long length.
If you don't put butter, it will crack as you roll it up. Mind you, it cracks anyway a little bit, but that all adds to its charm.
Then simply line the edge of the pastry with the sausage and spinach mixture.
When I was trying this out, I tried it out on my husband, who has a passion for sausages in any form, and he thought it was really good. It's looking good, isn't it? Now I'm going to roll it. It will crack a bit, says she, thinking it will definitely crack. I really would like 4 hands here. It would be easier. That's it.
Roll up the sausage filo, brushing the top with a little melted butter on each turn. And it's ready to cook.
If you take the tin that you make a Victoria sponge in and you just lightly butter that inside and then butter the top like that. So get hold of this firmly, drop it in, push it round. That's it. It's quite fun, but it's nerve-wracking when you do it for the first time. Now that went in quite easily, but sometimes it cracks all along. Don't be perturbed by that, because it doesn't matter a bit.
A final brush of butter, and then sprinkle with some sesame seeds to give it extra crunch.
Like that.
That goes into the middle of a 200-fan oven for about 40 minutes. It will come out beautifully golden and ready to serve to a hungry family.
I knew you were going to ask, is it done underneath? Well, look at that. Not bad.
Reducing waste is the key to keeping costs down when cooking.
You want to make the most of every ingredient.
Nuts are expensive, but here's how to keep them fresh for longer.
Nuts are high in fat and oils, and if you try to keep them in a cupboard, they go rancid very quickly.
If sealed in an airtight container and kept in the freezer, ground nuts will be fine for a year and whole nuts for up to 2 years. Leftover stale bread can be made into breadcrumbs.
I can remember doing this in the early days, grating it, which was jolly difficult.
And also kept in the freezer for up to 2 months.
If you buy mushrooms that are covered in plastic, first thing you do when you get home is put them into paper bags. They keep best that way.
There's one ingredient that I think stands out when it comes to sensible cooking. The humble egg.
I'd be hard-pressed to think of an ingredient that's more useful and economical than an egg.
Though there are farms classified as free-range up and down the country, there is still a broad definition of what free-range actually means.
So these have been collected today. They'll go down to the egg room now and graded to make sure there's no cracks in them. And then 5 o'clock this afternoon, they'll be going to London and in the shops tomorrow morning.
Paddy and Steph Bourne set up a decade ago. Their aim was to put their chickens' well-being at the centre of what they did.
Quite old-fashioned, really. So we breed everything on site. We keep all the cockerels and boys alive when they're hatched. So it's called a closed flock scenario. And it's really done in a manner that was probably done 80, 90 years ago. We're passionate about the way we look after our animals and the way we conduct our farm. We've ended up with an amazing egg off the back of what we do.
We've never set out to get a really good egg.
No, we didn't, no. I mean, if we produced the worst egg in the world, it wouldn't bother me as long as the chickens were looked after. But it happens that all the little things that we've done
have made a big difference.
Yeah, chickens are very complex animals. I think they have to be treated and looked after with the utmost of kind of respect. You know, if you don't look after them particularly well, they won't perform very well.
Paddy and Steph's chickens roam around at their leisure, only having to share with a couple of four-legged friends.
This really is idyllic. Absolutely beautiful wherever you look. Lucky chickens. How did all this begin?
I came to an estate in the Cotswolds and was running a chicken farm, and a lady walked in the door for her parents to buy a dozen eggs. And she walked out.
Love at first sight.
Love at first sight. She walked out with a dozen eggs and a husband. I mean, you know, for £1.50 at the time.
Do you reckon you got good value?
I do think I've got good value, yeah.
They also had their daughter, Sybil, who is already training for the hard life of a farmer.
I'm gonna run the farm one day.
We start at 6 in the morning and we let out all the chickens, so we go around all the sheds and check it they're OK. The chicken always lays its eggs from 7 o'clock in the morning till probably 1 o'clock in the afternoon, so that's the period.
Is that true?
Yeah.
They actually have a given time?
Yeah, they do,
I
yeah.
never knew
And they go in
that.
their nest boxes, don't they? Lay their eggs.
So we collect all the eggs, go around the sheds continuously collecting eggs.
And the actual grass, it looks so healthy.
There's herbs in it, isn't there?
We don't want to use anything that's unnatural, so what we do every year is we pull the sheds to fresh pasture. Gives the ground a complete rest, and then it comes back the next year. It just gives for a healthier bird and a healthier environment for them.
How long does a hen go on laying?
We have some birds that lay for 2 years, but our pure breeds, some of them are 6 years old now.
They're still going.
And still going, yeah.
And what happens to the old birds?
In the last 10 years, all of our hens have been rehomed.
You both look so very happy here.
It's a way of life, isn't
Being
it?
together, yeah. Love it, absolutely love it. Having a family, just kind of having those old-fashioned kind of things, you know.
Where our food comes from is important, but so is being able to afford it. I've always loved my next recipe because it makes use of one of the most economical cuts of steak around.
This is a steak night special, but a little bit less expensive, using bavette steak. And it's known as the secret butcher's cut because they keep for themselves to take home. It has beautiful marbling of the fat throughout the meat, and that makes it tender and flavoursome.
Steaks are easier to cook if they are the same thickness, so don't hold back.
I always go back to when our son William was on a very early programme that I did, and I remember Judy Chalmers saying to him, "What do you like about making bread?" He said, "I like the thumping." And it does get it out of your system, doesn't it? That looks fairly even to me. I'm going to cook this bavette steak very quickly on a high heat, and to give it a really good flavour, I'm going to marinate it. Some olive oil, 2 tablespoons, everybody out.
Then the balsamic glaze, muscovado sugar, chopped thyme and garlic.
What with the smell of garlic and thyme, it's lovely.
Coat the steaks in the fragrant marinade, season, then leave for at least a couple of hours. I can get on with the most economical of veg.
Piping hot roasting tin.
In go 750 grams of new potatoes and 3 red onions.
Salt and pepper.
Those go into a 200-fan oven for about 25 minutes or until the potatoes are lightly golden. Now to concentrate on those beautifully marinated steaks.
I'm going to cook these very quickly and on a very hot pan. One there, listen, sizzle, sizzle. 1 to 2 minutes each side. Look at that.
They smell wonderful, and for about half the cost of sirloin or ribeye.
That's it. If you just put a lid over the top, leave them to rest for about 10 minutes.
Time to check on the roasted veg.
Looking absolutely scrumptious. Push them all up one end. That's it.
Throw in some cherry tomatoes, douse with olive oil, balsamic glaze and season. To mirror the flavours of the steak marinade, add some thyme and garlic to the roast veg.
This is all about flavour. They're all inexpensive things. Give it a good stir. Just look at that, doesn't it look good?
Pop back in the oven for about 8 minutes.
These steaks are rested. Don't they look brilliant? They've got that lovely shine. That comes from the marinade. Oh, what a treat.
All that's needed is a big platter so everyone can dig in.
Sheer luxury, but not expensive. This is steak night fit for a king. It does look amazing, and it's going to taste even better.
The makeup of an egg is influenced by many things. The outside shell by the hen's breed.
So we've got 4 breeds. We have Rhode Island Reds, which produce a normal brown egg. We have Aracanas that produce green eggs. We have Morans, which produce the dark brown eggs. And we have Arlington Whites, which produce the white eggs.
And I believe the quality of an egg is affected by how the chickens are fed and treated. From intensive to organic options, 56% of us now want to know how our eggs are farmed. I've boiled up 2 eggs from either end of that scale to show the difference.
And I'm going to start off by trying that one. It really tastes exceedingly bland. There's no depth of flavour. This one is absolutely bright orange. Oh, that's a total different kettle of fish. It tastes really beautiful, the sort of thing you want to wake up to on a Sunday morning. If you're making a whole meal, it's certainly, to my mind, worth the extra few pence because it tastes better.
Before I leave, Sybil wants me to meet the next generation.
I've never seen a grey one before. Let me have this little black one.
They come out of different shells because those ones come out of brown shells and those ones come out of white shells.
Yes, do you know that's something that people don't realise, that white chickens lay white eggs and brown chickens
Lay brown
eggs. So tell me, have they got names?
One's called Mary, that one's called Berry.
Oh, which is your favourite cake made with eggs?
I like chocolate cake.
Chocolate cake. Well, you can't make a chocolate cake without good eggs.
And you can't make chocolate cake without chocolate.
No, of course not.
Of course, it is possible to make lovely cakes without eggs, but my next recipe shows how to use them to their fullest. This lemon and lime meringue pie is truly spectacular.
Everybody goes, isn't it delicious? And can I have a second helping? It's just one of those puds that everybody loves, and they think it's very difficult to make. It isn't. I've made my own sweet short crust pastry, or you can buy it, and it's quite inexpensive.
Use a spoon to gently create a wave along the edges.
That's it. And then I'm going to prick the base with a fork. That'll stop it rising up in a balloon. So you've got to go right down so that you can see the tin underneath.
Chill the pastry, then bake blind for about 15 minutes in a 180 fan oven. Then remove the beans and give it an extra 5 minutes so the case becomes super crispy.
With meringue, I reckon you need something rather sharp.
What makes this pudding so majestic is its lemon and lime filling. Add 30 grams of corn flour to 200 ml of cold water.
Make sure every scrap goes in, otherwise I won't have a nice thick mixture.
Then the zest of a lemon and a lime along with their juice. Give that a good whisk so there's no corn flour stuck in the bottom of the pan, and then onto the heat.
That's beautifully thick, just as I wanted it to be. I'm going to add the sugar now and take it off the heat and add the egg yolks. So all in at once, like that, and give it a good beat. And just remember, eggs are such good value. We're only using 3 eggs in a pud that'll serve 6 or 8 people.
Allow this delicious filling to cool before pouring.
That just smells of lemony lime and sharpness and richness. This needs to get cold and set before piping on top. Now to the meringues. Clean bowl to start with. The egg whites must have absolutely no egg yolk in it, nice fresh eggs. I'm going to whisk it until it looks like cloud. First of all slowly and then fast. Now on full speed.
Once the egg white has some volume but isn't yet holding a peak, it's time to add 175 grams of sugar.
Add it little by little, always on full speed. Now that is beautifully shiny, holds up in peaks, and that's how it should be. Over the top of my head, very easy. I promise you, it will never fall down if you've done it properly.
Perfect. Now all that's needed is to pipe it onto that luscious citrus tart.
Just a moment, there's one that hasn't got a peak. I seek perfection, so I'm just going to do this one again. That's it. So there it is, all ready for the oven. 130 for about 40 minutes. Doesn't that look simply beautiful? Just from 3 eggs, lemon and lime, pastry case. I can hear that crispy. Did you hear the crispy as it went through? It looks pretty good. I think that is a very decadent pudding that has taken care but inexpensive ingredients, and I think anyone would be very proud to serve that for a very special occasion.
And there you have it. What better way to make the most of humble ingredients? 4 delicious recipes, with an eye on some budget options. Perfect for whoever you are feeding. Enjoy.